why some U.S. preachers think that the Antichrist will come from Russia. The USSR was perceived by wide sections of American society not only as a geopolitical but also a sacred enemy, which was reflected in Ronald Reagan's speech to evangelicals in 1983, when the American president dubbed the Soviet Union evil empire. Of course, we know that the USSR even outlawed religion and faith. Can you imagine? Some Russian people that live in Greece that fled right after communism fell were telling me that, in the factories in Russia, they used to give you food every day. You had lunch there every day. So they purposefully had meat on Fridays, and they would watch who would not eat meat, because they were, Wednesdays and Fridays they kept a fast, and report them so that they would eventually ended up losing their jobs because they were Christian. So you can imagine what was going on. Now, the restructuring and subsequent disintegration of the Soviet state softened the perception of Russia in many religious communities, but the country's activity in the Middle East revived old eschatological concepts based on peculiar interpretation of the Bible. Not only that, but what's happening in Ukraine. The patriarch even blessed Putin and said, told the soldiers, when you die, you go directly to paradise. That's not even Christian. I remember I read a diary of a Russian soldier who was supposedly at the fall of Constantinople back in 1453, and he was hiding so that he was hiding inside the city so that when it was under siege by the Muslims, Muhammad, who overtook it finally, and he was hiding in order not to kill anyone because he was not yet baptized. Okay, so he was, even though he was a soldier, he was afraid of taking someone's life. So you can imagine the difference between then and now. Now, the interpretation of Scripture continues to give some Christian activists in the United States a pretext for detecting apocalyptic threats from Russia. As the modern writer and evangelist Joel Rosenberg states, the collapse of the USSR does not mean the death of the Russian bear, but the prophet Ezekiel gives a clear understanding that he is in hibernation and will soon return with revenge, and that is happening now. Okay? And the whole world is out of whack because of that. But I personally think, and I recently put an article up, read an article on a political article, and I've uploaded that Putin's minions are playing right into the WF playbook for the globalist New World Order agenda of 230. Now, Ezekiel's prophecy, the negative assessment of the USSR among American religious communities has always been based on not only Soviet atheism and destruction of churches, but also on the biblical prophecy of Ezekiel of the Old Testament. In accordance with this prediction, quote, in the last years, end quote, the ruler Gog from the northern land of Magog will invade Israel with the Persians, that is Iran, Ethiopians and Libyans, as well as with the wars of Homer and the house of Fogarma. The wrath of God will fall on the invaders, and a great shock will happen in the land of Israel. All living beings will tremble, and mountains will fall, and cliffs will fall, and all walls will fall to the ground, Ezekiel says. However, the invaders will be defeated after all sinking rain, stone, hail, fire, and brimstone hit them. Does that sound like a nuclear disaster? Gog and his troops will perish, and God will send fire to the land of the invading ruler. This is prophecy. And so all this, according to the prophecy, will happen to the glory of the Lord. It's noteworthy that in the New Testament, the words Gog and Magog designate pagan tribes that will go to battle with the people of God. The events from the Old Testament book of Ezekiel were subsequently associated by theologians with the Antichrist and the Last Judgment. According to the blessed Augustine, St. Augustine, I think his feast day in the Christian Orthodox Church is every August 1st, St. Augustine, Gog represents the enemies of the church, and Magog personifies the devil. So what does Russia have to do with all this? Nevertheless, the allegorical interpretation of the concepts from the prophecy of Ezekiel was never the only one. As early as the 1st century AD, the historian Josephus Flavius identified the people of Magog with the Scythians, that is, an area of Russia today, and later many readings in the Old Testament words appeared which were attributed by researchers to different peoples living north of Israel. The reason for Magog's connection with Russia was the first verse of the 39th chapter of the book of Ezekiel, in which Gog is called the Prince of Russia, which is the consonant with Russia. Meshech and Tubala. There are no capital letters in Hebrew, which is why Bible translators often had to deal with ambiguous situation. The word Rosh was given the meaning of a proper name only by the Greeks, while representatives of the Latin faith most often understood it as the adjective main, like Rosh Hashanah. It was this word that caused the binding of Ezekiel's prophecy to Russia. At the same time, in the Bible of King James, which Protestants consider canonical, the King James Bible, Gog is called the supreme prince of Meshech and Tubal. This version of the Holy Scriptures is considered the official one for the English language and is most widespread in the United States. Therefore, it's very strange when American Christian activists resort to the Greek translation when interpreting Ezekiel, because the Greek translation is supposedly from the Hebrew translation. Now, when you translate from then from Greek to English, some things get lost in the translation, obviously. Freaks and speculators. There's no state church in the United States, and religious policy contributes to the emergence of a wide variety of spiritual communities, which is why Christian denominations are widespread in the country. Organizations that are intermediate between the church and the sect. Most often, the preachers of these particular associations declare that Russia is connected with the Antichrist. Thus, the official website of the Family International Movement claims that Russia is Magog and Meshech and Tubal are Moscow and Tobolsk. According to supporters of such views, domestic support for Syria could lead to an invasion of Israel, which would mean the fulfillment of Ezekiel's prophecy. The founder of the religious movement Koinonia House, Chuck Missler, who announced the beginning of the apocalypse on January 1st, 2000, believes that Russia will attack Israel together with Turkey, which will withdraw from NATO. Turkey, as we know, is a member of NATO. But that doesn't stop Turkey from invading anybody. Turkey invaded Cyprus and took half the island. Cyprus is also a NATO member. Now, Joel Rosenberg, mentioned above, interprets the book of Ezekiel as a prediction of Russia's invasion of the Holy Land, together with Muslim countries. Let's remember, Israel wants to build the third temple. They claim that they know where the Ark of the Covenant is. It's right under the Dome of the Rock, which is under Muslim control. So the Ezekiel prediction of Russia's invasion of the Holy Land together with Muslim countries, first of all with Iran, which in the Old Testament is understood as Persians, of course. Typically, people who claim such things have a reputation in the United States as either eccentric or religious speculators. Each on a different path. Throughout the history of Christianity, many social groups that called themselves adherents of the truth and of the faith created their own Antichrist, which, according to the Bible, is covered with good ideas. The Protestants, including Martin Luther King and John Calvin, considered the Pope to be his incarnation. The Russian Old Believers considered Peter I in his capacity. The Bible, in isolation from its canonical reading, provides opportunities for a varied interpretation of reality, not only because of the imagery and the volume, but also because of the complexity of translation from ancient Hebrew, which fell out of use in the 2nd century AD. And this is on Soul Ask. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.